What if I told you one of the greatest guitarists in history spent his entire life trying to escape a pain that started before he even understood who he was? Before the Grammys, before Layla, before sold-out arenas and legendary solos, Eric Clapton was just a confused little boy growing up in a small English village surrounded by secrets, and those secrets would shape everything that came after. Eric Clapton was born in 1945 in Ripley, Surrey, England, right at the end of the Second World War. But almost immediately his life became complicated. The people he believed were his parents were actually his grandparents, and the woman he thought was his older sister was really his mother. His mother, Patricia, was only 16 when she gave birth to him, after a relationship with a Canadian soldier stationed in England during the war. The soldier went back to Canada. Patricia stayed behind with a child she wasn't ready to raise. So, her parents stepped in and raised Eric as their own son. For years, Clapton had no idea. Then, when he was around 9 years old, the truth finally came out. Imagine discovering your entire family had been lying to you since birth. And it gets crazier. After reconnecting with Patricia, she eventually moved away to Germany with her new husband, leaving Eric behind once again. That feeling of abandonment stayed with him for the rest of his life. Years later, Clapton admitted loneliness followed him through almost every chapter of his career. And when you look at what happened afterward, you start to understand why. But while his family life was falling apart, music became his escape. His grandmother loved piano music. His uncle constantly played American jazz and blues records around the house. Clapton became obsessed with the blues because it sounded real, raw, honest. The music felt like people turning pain into something meaningful. When he was 13, his grandparents gave him a cheap acoustic guitar. At first, he hated it. The strings hurt his fingers, and the instrument felt impossible to play. He gave up almost immediately. Then 2 years later, he picked it up again. And this time, something clicked. Clapton started spending hours alone, teaching himself blues songs from records by B.B. King, Freddie King, and Buddy Guy. While other teenagers were out socializing, he stayed inside practicing guitar non-stop. By the early 1960s, Britain was exploding with young musicians inspired by American blues music. But even in that crowded scene, Eric Clapton stood out fast. Not because he played the loudest or fastest, because he made the guitar sound emotional. There was something wounded in his playing that people instantly connected with. After getting expelled from art college for skipping classes, Clapton decided music was the only thing he wanted. No backup plan, no normal career. Just a guitar and an obsession. Then in 1963, he joined a band called the Yardbirds, and that decision would completely change his life. The Yardbirds quickly became one of the hottest bands in England's growing rock scene. At the time, groups like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were transforming music, and suddenly, British audiences were obsessed with American blues. Clapton fit perfectly into that world. Night after night, crowds packed into small clubs just to watch him play guitar. And here's where it gets wild. Fans became so obsessed with his solos that whenever he broke a guitar string on stage, they would actually slow clap while waiting for him to fix it. That moment supposedly inspired his famous nickname, Slow Hand. By 1964, Clapton was already developing a reputation as one of the best young guitarists in Britain. His style sounded different, smooth but aggressive. Emotional without feeling forced. Other players copied notes. Clapton made the guitar feel like it was speaking, but success created a problem almost immediately. The Yardbirds wanted bigger commercial hits. Clapton wanted pure blues. Then the band released For Your Love, a more radio-friendly song that became a major hit. Most musicians would celebrate that moment. Clapton hated it. He thought the band was abandoning its blues roots and chasing pop success. So, right as fame was finally arriving, he quit. It sounded insane. He had finally made it into a successful band, and he walked away because he thought they were becoming too commercial. But what if I told you that decision actually made him even bigger? After leaving the Yardbirds, Clapton joined John Mayall's Blues Breakers, and this is where his legend really exploded. The band's 1966 album became one of the most influential blues rock records ever made. Fans were so obsessed with Clapton's playing, that graffiti started appearing across London that simply read, "Clapton is God." Imagine being in your early 20s and seeing people literally worshiping you on city walls. But even then, Clapton never seemed comfortable with fame. The more attention he received, the more isolated he became. And then came Cream. In 1966, Clapton teamed up with bassist Jack Bruce and drummer Ginger Baker to form what would become one of the first true supergroups in Iraq history. Cream was loud, chaotic, experimental, and completely different from almost everything else at the time. The band blended blues, psychedelic rock, and long improvisational solos into something audiences had never really heard before. And suddenly, Clapton wasn't just respected, he was becoming a global star. Songs like Sunshine of Your Love, White Room, and Crossroads turned Cream into an international phenomenon.
Darling, now, I'll stay with you till my horses run down moonbeams in yours now. Take my rhythm on my side.
Clapton's guitar solos became legendary because they sounded unpredictable. 1 second smooth and controlled, the next completely explosive. But behind the scenes, the band was a disaster. Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker constantly fought with each other. Egos clashed non-stop. Touring became exhausting. Fame became overwhelming. And as pressure kept building, Clapton started turning towards something that would haunt him for decades: drugs. At first, it was recreational. Pretty common in the late 1960s rock scene. But it didn't stay casual for long. Because underneath all the success, Clapton was still carrying the same loneliness and confusion he had felt since childhood. And now, he finally had enough money and fame to disappear into it. By the early 1970s, Eric Clapton's heroin addiction was spiraling out of control. Friends watched him disappear for weeks at a time. Concerts became unreliable. Recording sessions turned chaotic. Some people genuinely thought he might not survive the decade. And the scary part was how quickly it happened. Cream had already collapsed under the pressure of constant fighting and non-stop touring. Clapton briefly formed other projects, including Blind Faith, but nothing seemed stable for long. Fame was getting bigger. His personal life was getting worse. Then Pattie Boyd entered the picture. And this next part changes everything. Pattie Boyd wasn't just any woman. She was married to George Harrison from the Beatles. Harrison and Clapton were close friends who bonded over music and guitars, which made what happened next incredibly messy. Clapton became completely obsessed with her. Not quietly obsessed either, desperately obsessed. His feelings for Pattie inspired some of the most famous songs of his career, including Layla. And what made the song so powerful was that audiences could hear the desperation in it. It didn't sound polished or calculated. It sounded like someone emotionally falling apart in real time. At one point, Clapton even confessed his feelings directly to Harrison while drunk. Imagine that conversation. Two of the biggest musicians on earth sitting there while one admits he's in love with the other's wife. Somehow, their friendship survived it, at least for a while. Meanwhile, Clapton's addiction kept getting worse. Heroin completely consumed his life. Friends described him as isolated and barely functional. There were long stretches where he practically vanished from music entirely. But wait, this next part changes everything. In the mid-1970s, Clapton finally started trying to get sober. It wasn't easy. He relapsed multiple times and replaced heroin with heavy alcohol use, which created a whole new set of problems. Then came one of the darkest moments of his career. In 1976, during a concert in Birmingham, England, Clapton made drunken, racist, and xenophobic remarks on stage that shocked fans and damaged his reputation badly. The backlash was immediate. Many people couldn't believe the same musician so deeply inspired by black blues artists was saying those things publicly. The incident became so controversial, it helped inspire the Rock Against Racism movement in Britain. For years afterward, it remained a stain on his legacy. But somehow, even after all of that, his career survived. And musically, he kept producing hits. Songs like Wonderful Tonight turned him into an even bigger mainstream star. Ironically, that song was written about Pattie Boyd, the woman who had already caused so much chaos in his life. Eventually, Patti divorced George Harrison, and in 1979, she married Clapton. For a moment, it looked like he finally got the happy ending he wanted. But the reality behind the scenes was far more complicated. Clapton still struggled with alcohol. The marriage became strained by infidelity, addiction, and emotional distance. He desperately wanted a family, partly because of his own painful childhood. But the relationship kept deteriorating. And while married to Patti, Clapton had affairs with other women and fathered children outside the marriage. The fairy tale romance that inspired Layla slowly collapsed under the weight of real life.
I can't fool, I'm in love with you. Turn my whole life.
By the late 1980s, the marriage was over, and Eric Clapton was once again left trying to fill a loneliness that fame, money, and success never seemed to fix. After his divorce from Patti Boyd, Clapton's life finally seemed to calm down. In the late 1980s, he began a relationship with Italian actress Lori Del Santo, and in 1986, they welcomed a son named Connor. For Eric Clapton, Connor changed everything. Friends noticed he became softer, more present, more emotionally grounded. After years of addiction and chaos, fatherhood gave him a sense of purpose he had never really experienced before. Clapton later admitted that spending time with Connor became the center of his world. But what if I told you the happiest chapter of his life would also become the most devastating? In March 1991, Clapton was in New York visiting Connor. The night before the tragedy, the two had gone to the circus together. By all accounts, it was a joyful day. Then the next morning, everything changed in seconds. Connor accidentally ran through an open window in a Manhattan apartment and fell 49 stories to his death. He was only 4 years old. The shock completely destroyed Clapton. Later, he described walking through the streets afterward in disbelief, almost unable to process what had happened. Even after seeing the police and paramedics, part of him still thought it couldn't possibly be real. And here's the heartbreaking part. Connor had become one of the biggest reasons Clapton stayed sober. Losing him pushed the musician into a level of grief few people could even imagine. But instead of disappearing completely, Clapton poured that pain into music. That grief became Tears in Heaven. The song wasn't written to chase awards or radio success. It was a father trying to survive unimaginable loss. And listeners felt that immediately. The track became one of the most emotional songs of the 1990s because it sounded painfully real. Suddenly, millions of people who knew Clapton as a guitar legend saw a completely different side of him. Not a rock star, just a grieving father. In the years after Connor's death, Clapton slowly rebuilt his life. The tragedy changed him permanently, but it also pushed him towards stability in a way fame never could. He focused heavily on sobriety and became outspoken about addiction recovery, even helping establish treatment centers for people struggling with substance abuse. Then, in 1999, another major chapter began. At a party hosted by fashion designer Giorgio Armani, Clapton met Melia McKinery, a young assistant working for Armani at the time. Unlike many relationships in his past, this one developed away from constant public drama. And for once, things actually seemed peaceful. The two married in 2002 and eventually had children together. After decades filled with addiction, broken relationships, scandals, and tragedy, Clapton finally appeared to find the family life he had always wanted. But age brought a new challenge he couldn't escape: his health. In 2016, Clapton revealed he had developed peripheral neuropathy, a condition that causes nerve damage, numbness, and severe pain, especially in the hands and legs. For most people, it would be difficult. For one of the greatest guitarists ever, it was terrifying. Then came hearing loss. Imagine spending your entire life defined by music only to slowly lose the ability to properly hear it. Clapton admitted performing had become increasingly difficult, and many fans feared his touring days were ending. But even with those physical struggles, he refused to completely walk away from music. Because for Eric Clapton, music was never just fame or money, it was survival. The same lonely kid who once sat alone practicing blues records in England had somehow become one of the most influential musicians in rock history. More than 100 million records sold, 18 Grammy Awards, songs like Layla, Wonderful Tonight, and Tears in Heaven becoming part of music history forever.
Feel wonderful tonight, here in heaven.
But the strange thing about Eric Clapton's story is that his greatest songs often came from his darkest moments. And maybe that's why people still connect with his music decades later. Because underneath the fame, the awards, and the legendary guitar solos was someone constantly trying to turn pain into something beautiful. Even after all the tragedy, Eric Clapton never fully disappeared from music. Most artists would have retired long ago after everything he survived. Addiction, public scandals, broken relationships, the death of his son, serious health problems. But Clapton kept going, and maybe that's because music was the only constant thing in his life from the very beginning. Over the years, younger guitarists continued treating him almost like a mythical figure. His influence spread across generations of rock, blues, and even pop music. Some copied his solos, others copied his tone, but very few could replicate the emotion behind it. Because Clapton's best playing never sounded perfect. It sounded human. And that's probably why audiences stayed connected to him for more than 50 years. They weren't just listening to technical skill. They were hearing somebody work through pain in real time. Even now, despite nerve damage and hearing loss making performances increasingly difficult, Clapton still refuses to completely step away from music. He has admitted that some days playing guitar physically hurts. Imagine that. The instrument that made him famous becoming painful to even hold. But he continues anyway, because after everything, the guitar is still the one thing that understands him best. And here's something a lot of people forget. Clapton didn't just survive different eras of music, he dominated them. From the British blues explosion of the 1960s to arena rock in the 70s, emotional ballads in the 80s, and acoustic performances in the 90s, he somehow kept reinventing himself while still sounding unmistakably like Eric Clapton. That's rare. Most musicians become trapped in one era. Clapton kept evolving, even while carrying the emotional weight of his past. But what if I told you some fans believed the pain was actually the source of his genius? Think about it. Layla came from obsession and heartbreak. Tears in Heaven came from unimaginable grief. Even his blues playing carried this sadness that listeners instantly recognized. It felt real because it was real. And the craziest part is that Eric Clapton almost lost everything multiple times. There were years when addiction controlled his life so badly that people around him feared he would either overdose or disappear completely from music. Other artists from that era never escaped those cycles. Some died young, some burned out completely. Somehow, Clapton survived long enough to tell the story himself. That survival became part of his legacy too. By the 2000s, Clapton was no longer just viewed as a rock star. He had become one of the last living connections to the original blues musicians who inspired British rock in the first place. He openly credited artists like B.B. King and Muddy Waters for shaping his sound, and many younger fans actually discovered classic blues music because of him. And despite all the controversy surrounding parts of his life and career, nobody could deny his impact on music history. Few guitarists changed rock music the way Eric Clapton did. Fewer still survived long enough to reflect on it. And maybe that's the real story here. Not perfection, not fame, survival. From a lonely child in Surrey to one of the most celebrated musicians alive, Eric Clapton spent decades battling addiction, grief, scandal, and isolation, while somehow continuing to create music that connected with millions of people around the world. And through every high and every devastating low, the guitar never left his side.